what question, I think is deep. I think that allows growth. I think instead of just facts, why do I think that? And I think in our conversations, not only do I get to ask those of you, but you will come back at me. You will force the teacher to become the student and answer the question. And that's true growth, right? Student is teacher is coach. And I think that is a sign, a symbol of what education means to me. And, not every student, as a teacher in 31 years, I haven't touched every student the same way academically and the same impact, right? And I think you're not going to reach every student, but I think there are those students that you've sort of sparked an interest. And I think you've always had a desire for those conversations, so you return and to get a greater depth of knowledge. And to me, when a student comes back, how do you say no? How do you not continue to push and to get greater knowledge? And I think that's one of the reasons why, as far as our relationship, it's student teacher, but it flips, right? It allows both of us to learn from each other. And
Absolutely.
I think that's very important.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing, right? Because I know I can speak for people that went to the same school as me, right? Who made it as a teacher. There are a lot of people who haven't kept in touch with teachers or administrators or things like that. But I can honestly say, being a 17, 18-year-old kid in your class, where I fucking hated school. Like, it's not a secret.
Right.
Everyone who knows me knows I hated school. I was a great student, had good grades, but I hated school.
Right.
The only class I liked coming to was yours.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I think for me, as I look back, there were a lot of coaches, right? Like my freshman basketball coach is like my dad. He took me in like a son. And I think my varsity basketball coach, my 8th grade basketball coach, I just spoke this past summer in Cooperstown, and he invited me to speak to a baseball group about my Memphis Red Sox book. And these guys took a chance on a kid. If you've asked me, it's kind of funny, we talk about the way you view yourself as a high school kid. If I look back at who I was as like an 8th grader or something in high school, I thought I was a very lost kid. I didn't really know where I was going. I didn't know what my dream was. I just thought I was a kid just trying to survive. My identity, who am I? So those are questions that I was probably pretty insecure about at 15, 16, 17 years old. And the support of teachers, and in this case, these coaches that were in my life, they allowed me to become the man that I am today. And for me, the best way for me to repay them is to be that type of teacher and coach for the students entrusted in my care. And that's you, right? In public school, you don't get to choose. These are the kids that are there, and you have to love them. If you ask my wife which of the 3 schools that I love the most between Sheffield, Millington, and Christian Brothers, she'd probably tell you Sheffield because that's where my heart was the most. But then when I got to Millington, I absolutely fell in love with that community. It's blue collar nature. It's the most diverse school I've ever been at. And there were so many stories there, and so many kids like yourself, that if someone could just believe in them, then they could be something far greater than what the world expected them to be. And that's the point of education, right?
It is. And that's a great introduction to who you are.
Thank you.
That's a great intro to not just who you are as a teacher, as an educator, but as a man. So that speaks volumes about you. And that is why you are our second interview. And that is why you are somebody that I knew I could sit down and deep dive with. This is the first time Courtney won't be on the podcast, right? So, and this being the first time that Courtney is not here, I don't know how viewers are going to take it. We'll see what happens, right? But I did know that it was important to get somebody on here who I trusted, who I cared about, and who I knew had a lot to offer. That's what matters to me.
Right.
Your bio alone is pretty amazing. I'm going to just read for people. Let folks know who Doc is, right? So today, we are honored to be in the presence of a storyteller, a historian who doesn't just teach the past, he makes it breathe, shout, and dribble down the hardwood of memory. Dr. Keith Wood is a 30-year veteran of the classroom, grinding and currently shaping minds in the social studies department at Christian Brothers High School. Shout out to the brothers.
All right.
But we have to be honest, right? Although you're a white man who teaches history, your story goes far past that. You surpassed that by far. You're definitely not an average teacher. Being someone that had you, I can speak to that. You know, that you grew up in New York amongst different cultures and perspectives where you came from what we would consider an inner city, right? Being there, you learned about race, sports, and now being someone who's from up north, you now have, but not just a northern identity, but also a southern identity.
Absolutely.
Right?
The other day, I was out shopping with my wife, and we were having a conversation about Negro Leagues baseball. I was at Lids, and I was trying to explain to the young brother that was there, looking at the hats with me. I said, well, we're from Memphis, and my wife looked at me, and I think that's the first time in our 30-year marriage that I actually said I'm from Memphis, and I'm not from New York. So she appreciated that. She held me to it. As quiet as she's like, oh, really? Where are you from again? She tells me all the time that I've lived in Memphis longer than I've lived in New York. I left New York at 22, so I've been in Memphis for almost 31 years now. So there's a nice gap there. So I actually have been adopted by Memphis. The 901 is adopted Keith Wood, and I had some great experiences and some opportunities to teach and to coach throughout the city, inner city schools, county schools, private schools, and just those opportunities have shaped me as a historian and as a teacher.
So being that you taught at all of these different institutions, which institution would you say had the most impact on you? Like not just as a teacher, but as a white man in Memphis.
I think at 22, I probably thought I could come in and change the world. I had very little understanding of the culture of the city of Memphis. To be honest, for your listeners out there, Keith Wood had to pull out a map. It was before Google, so I actually had to pull out an atlas and figure out where Memphis was in Tennessee. And I knew where Tennessee was. I knew about Elvis Presley. I knew that Martin Luther King was assassinated here. I knew that I was a big fan of sports. So in the 80s, I knew the Memphis Showboats. I played in the USFL, and I knew about Reggie White a little bit. And that was it, right? It was very minimal. But I was willing to come to the Memphis City Schools and to try it, to give it a try. To go back home wasn't an option. I wasn't going to fail. To go back home was not, I didn't want to move back into the neighborhood where I grew up. I needed to find who Keith Wood was, and Memphis nurtured that. I was able to land a teaching job. I was able to be an assistant basketball coach for a couple of years, and then get the head coach at varsity. And then really, in that time, figure out who I was as both a teacher and a coach, a mentor, all those things. To be honest, a lot of the times I used the fact that I was from New York, that I did have a different identity, the construction of who I am and where I came from. You mentioned being from New York, right? So Schenectady is very much like you take New York City and then you go up 2 hours. It's an industrial town. There are Italian neighborhoods, Irish neighborhoods, Polish neighborhoods, each with their own Catholic parishes. There's the black neighborhood, and then they threw us all together at one high school. And it was a huge melting pot. So I had to find my way there. And here I am, a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. I'm the other. How do I navigate that? How do I figure out who I am? And what I found out is I could just be me inside of that community. And then I was embraced by Italians, Poles, Irish, African Americans, and the brotherhood, the community. That's how, when I look at students, I don't see A or B, I just see a kid, because in my neighborhood, we were just all kids and we all weren't the same, right? Not that it was a utopic experience, because there were definitely challenges, but I think that really impacted the way that I saw the world. And then my mother just taught me to love people for who they are. And I think that's pretty important. If we can just look at somebody across the table, just love them for who they are and not put some kind of social norm that society expects us to have, then we can be better people.
You know, that's beautiful. You and I share the same thought with that. We discuss that all the time. Like, people, I don't care if you are part of the LGBTQIA community. I don't care if you are white. I don't care if you are black, if you are of Latino descent. It doesn't matter to me, right? As long as you are not a horrible person, I will stand with you, period.
I think all of us can agree with that, right? I think if we would just look